you have a pocket that has a lot of the resources that we use in the Smoke Free for Me program that we'll be referencing today. So have those, look through them. You'll notice when we reference them in the slides. The other piece of paper that you have in front of you is an MOC2 quiz. And you'll notice there are only 5 blanks, but we actually have 10 questions. So when we get to the last 5, just number those and write your answers in. And I will pick up your sheets or leave them on the table for MOC credit. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gittleman to welcome and get us started today. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you everyone for coming. I really only have a couple things to say. My name is Mike Gittleman. I'm the chapter president. I'm also the medical director for the Smoke Free Families program. Just a few announcements. One is that you will get MOC2 credit for the beginning of the participation with the speakers this morning. You can answer questions on the answer sheet that's in front of you to be able to get the questions and get the credit. This is very participatory, so I trust that I know you will get all the answers correct, so don't feel any stress about it. And it's just a nice way to be able to get credit and learn a little something this morning. Right after the MOC2 program, we are having the beginning of our MOC4 program. I really hope that if you are interested in learning about smoking this morning and you're not participating in the MOC4 program, you'll be willing to stay and learn a little bit more about it. It's a really easy program to be involved in. It's a nice way for you to get MOC4 credit. And just if you stay, you'll hear more about it. But just in our wave 1 results, the effects that we're having with the patients that we're caring for is really unbelievable. So it's a great thing for your patients and the families that you care for. I just want to thank our sponsors. None of this would be possible without the funding from our sponsors. So you can see here are the sponsors that have been helping us out. And so this morning, just to go over a brief agenda, you will hear some great talks. First from Dr. Groner, and then next from Dr. Michelle Dritz. Each of these talks are your MOC2 program, and then as I said, we will be getting into the MOC4 program. I know that it's Saturday morning. I know that football starts around 12. We are going to do everything possible to get through this program quickly. So not only will you have great learning this morning, you also get to enjoy your afternoon. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. Groner.
All right, hopefully I can work this and get the slides going. So I'm thinking it's Saturday morning, and so we'll make it informal. So questions, we'll try to do, I think we can stay on time and take questions or comments while I'm talking. So if you want to add something or have a question, just raise your hand and we'll make it a more informal session. So I'm going to just talk about the addictive properties of nicotine so people understand a little bit more really why people smoke, and I think that's really helpful when we're talking to parents and individuals who do smoke or have trouble quitting, just to understand a little bit more about why that is so difficult. We're going to talk a little bit about in utero smoking. Even though we are not OBGYNs, we see the outcome of this, and I want to spend some time talking about the short and the long-term effects of being exposed to nicotine and tobacco in utero. And then I think all of us as pediatricians really do know many of the specific effects of secondhand smoke exposure are common pediatric diseases, but there may be a few that you're not aware of, so hopefully we'll increase your knowledge base there. So to start out with, why do people use tobacco, and I would say / nicotine at this point, because we do have the e-cigarettes that are really more nicotine-based than tobacco-based, but we can talk about that briefly later. Well, nicotine is physically addictive. There are nicotinic receptors in people's brains. And what happens is that as it's physically addictive, you develop tolerance, which means that you need more of it to give you the effect that you want. And after you withdraw from it, there are physical withdrawal effects. It's not just mental or emotional. And nicotine is a potent drug causing dopaminergic activation and CNS stimulation. And what has been described, because I'm not a smoker, is that people feel alert and relaxed at the same time. So feeling alert is a good thing. A lot of us, including myself, drink coffee to feel alert, but if you drink too much, you don't feel relaxed. So the idea of feeling alert and relaxed at the same time does seem like that could be a pretty important and good feeling to have. If it smokes these days in a room of physicians, pediatricians. There's probably nobody here who smokes. If we had a room of pediatricians 50 or 60 years ago, or physicians, probably a lot of the people there would be smoking. So there's a huge kind of sociological determination. And as a matter of fact, there's been like research on social networking, and like if people quit smoking, then sort of networks of people that knew them quit smoking, and there were kind of nodes of that network, and then people who didn't quit smoking, it's like they didn't know anybody that had quit. So there's just whole social networking involving this. So what happens if you puff on a cigarette, a traditional cigarette? 1 to 2 puffs occupies 50% of your nicotine receptors in your brain. So that's pretty quick, and it goes to your brain 6 seconds after inhalation. So in other words, this cigarette is really expertly devised to do what it needs to do, which is it's a nicotine delivery system, and it's really good at it because in 6 seconds you get what you need. So what does that mean to the smokers? It means that they get what they need in 6 seconds. So it's very. Okay. Can you hear me? It's very. Can you hear me? Do I need it? Okay, I wasn't using it anyway. Oh. It's very reinforcing. So the smoker who needs X amount of nicotine in the brain unconsciously will inhale X, might wait a little bit more to the next puff, might leave the cigarette sitting there, might take a deeper inhalation. They don't think about this. So this is just an amazing nicotine delivery device. It does what it needs to do, and that's why it's really hard for people to quit, because it works. And unlike other drug addictions like opioid addictions or stimulant addictions, people who smoke function well in society. Like I say, they're killing themselves, they're killing the people around them, but they're functioning very well. We have to really think about what's going on. Questions on that? Comments? So, as I alluded to before, there's a huge sociological base to this. And at this point in 2018, most of the people who smoke, smoking is really a disparity, and people in poverty are more likely to smoke. And this goes for both African Americans and whites. The less education you have, the lower income you have, the more likely you are to be a smoker. Other groups of people are people with mental illness. Schizophrenics, like they've done surveys, almost 100% of schizophrenics smoke. Is it because of the medication they take? Is it because the nicotine in their brain helps obviate some of the symptoms of schizophrenia? I'm not an expert in that field, but I will just tell you that epidemiologically, there's something with schizophrenics and smoking that's just a very strong association. There are particular vulnerable populations, Native Americans, Alaskans, 26% smoke. And I'll say that in certain groups, there's been a lot of targeting by the tobacco companies too. Specifically, African Americans have been targeted. LGBT groups are smoking more than they should in terms of their income, and they've also been targeted by tobacco companies. So tobacco companies have targeted vulnerable populations to at least introduce them to smoking. And when think about women are not the rates of women smoking really increased from the early 1900s when no women smoked, and it was the father of modern advertising, Edward Bernays, who was apparently in the early 1900s, at the rise of the early women's liberation movement, put out cigarettes as a way for women to be liberated, and you would see glamour and thinness associated with smoking. I don't have any ads to show you, but I think some people have seen those. And then the modern iteration of this came in the 1970s with the Virginia Slims movement. And at a certain point, lung cancer was the most common cancer death in women. But if you read a women's magazine in the 80s, you wouldn't know that, because all the articles would be about breast cancer or cervical cancer or ovarian cancer, but they wouldn't tell you that one of the most common causes of death in women was heart disease, which is associated with smoking. So there's just been a lot of targeting by tobacco companies to set up cigarettes as either glamorous or for African Americans to support different community activities that other groups are not supporting, and it's kind of insidious. Globally, we're just going to look at this slide for a second. So across the slide, you see just different causes of death. Ischemic heart disease, cerebrovascular disease, lower respiratory infections, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and the hatched marks are the proportion of that death that's contributed by tobacco. And then the final bar there is how much tobacco use contributes to like global death. And that's pretty high up there. So if you just add the contributions of death from ischemic heart disease, cerebrovascular disease, lower respiratory infections, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, all the way through to the cancers on the far right, you just see how much tobacco use contributes to worldwide death. Okay, now smoking during pregnancy, again, it's a disparity. About 12% of recent mothers reported smoking during pregnancy, which that's good and bad at the same time. It's lower than it's been, but it should be nothing. About half of the mothers who smoke prior to pregnancy report quitting during pregnancy, which is also good. So the rate of smoking in women might be like overall 22%, and so it's down at least half because women do quit during pregnancy because most women have gotten the message that it's bad for them to be smoking during pregnancy. Interestingly, attributable to maternal smoking during pregnancy is 5 to 8% of preterm deliveries, almost 13 to 19% of low birth weight, and almost a quarter of all SIDS deaths are attributed to maternal smoking during pregnancy. So that's really high. And I know that this is a group of pediatricians and not OBGYNs, but if any of you have colleagues in your OBGYN community in your area and you ever want to work on community projects together, talking about smoking during pregnancy is just such an important topic that pediatricians and OBGYNs can collaborate on. Outcomes after pregnancy, and this is outcomes that's been associated with smoking during pregnancy per se. So smoking during pregnancy alone, not even smoking after pregnancy, is associated with increased risk of asthma, wheezing, and airway hyperresponsiveness, birth defects, and SIDS, as we mentioned before. And the late outcomes that I wanted to talk about are behavioral, cognitive, and actually obesity, which is fascinating. So in terms of behavioral, cognitive, and obesity, we know that we can't do a controlled study, obviously, of people who smoke during pregnancy and people who don't. So all the data here is associational data on large data sets, but some of this work is not just done in the United States, some of this work has been done in Europe, and it turns out that there's a much greater risk of having a child with behavioral problems, mostly externalizing like ADHD and conduct disorder if the mom smoked during pregnancy. The IQ studies are suggestive that there's a couple of IQ points that you lose if your mom smoked during pregnancy. And then the obesity is really fascinating because everybody knows that if the mom smokes during pregnancy, there's a greater risk of a low birth weight baby. But what tends to happen, and we've seen the same thing in our preemies, is a lot of those kids probably have this what we call the thrifty phenotype. And what happens is there's probably epigenetic changes because the baby in utero is growing in a nutrition-poor environment. So after they're born, due to some changes of methylation of various genes, they're going to extract everything they can from all the nutrition they get. So there's strong epidemiological data. It's practically proven that kids who are exposed to tobacco during pregnancy are more likely to be struggling with obesity later in life. So these three things are the things that I personally think that is just not out there public health-wise. I mean, I've talked to some of my colleagues who do obesity work and they didn't even know this. But there's been a couple of community interventions in some cities to try to prevent obesity later in life, and they said that getting rid of smoking during pregnancy was the lead part of that public health intervention to prevent obesity. So again, I feel that in my personal work as a pediatrician and talking to my colleagues, this message just hasn't gotten out, and it hasn't gotten out to the OBGYNs, and I think there's a lot of room for working on letting people know, because I think people think if they just have a small baby, like, okay, the hospital will take care of my baby, like not that small, everything will be fine, maybe the delivery will be easier, but if they find out that their kids may have some of these school behavioral problems or may be struggling with obesity later in life, that may tip it toward being completely smoke-free. Now let's a little bit talk about secondhand smoke. So in the 2012 Amy Ames, which is a big survey which got biological samples on some kids, 40% of kids have detectable cotinine. Cotine's a nicotine metabolite. So what that means is 40% of kids had some exposure to nicotine tobacco smoke, and it's not clear exactly where that came from, but that's a lot. It's down from 54%, which was the 2007-2008 survey, but it represents 15 million children. And as we know, ear infections, more frequent and more severe asthma attacks, respiratory symptoms, bronchitis, bronchiolitis, and pneumonia and SIDS are all associated. And we talked about increasing conduct disorders more related to smoking during pregnancy and decreasing antioxidant levels even at low levels of exposure. And this just shows the percentage of non-smoking children who had serum cotinine. In other words, these children's serum cotinine didn't come from their own smoking. And you can see that the rates have definitely gone down, but with the highest rate being with African Americans, and then whites in the middle, and then Mexican Americans in between. So secondhand smoke is the smoke that's exhaled by the smoker or the smoke that just comes off the tip of the burning cigarette. It was first mentioned in the Surgeon General report really a long time ago, back in 1972, recognized as harmful in 74, and there was a first full report from the Surgeon General in the 80s. And Philip Morris Tobacco Company's own research actually recognized it as harmful. So this basically shows indoor air pollution, and RSP are respiratory suspendable particles, and PPAH are particular polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which is a form of air pollution. Both of these contribute to indoor air pollution. The PPAHs are carcinogens. Both of them cause inflammation and can be on the cascade to heart disease. So basically you can see in the line over here, at the bottom, is like the federal clean indoor air from particulate matter. So you can see that the room doesn't get back to normal for like 2 hours in terms of clean indoor air. So that's basically like smoking in a room and just 2 of the particulate matter elements that can come from the smoking. So, and this doesn't even show carbon monoxide. So the point of this slide is just to say that it takes 2 hours for the air quality to return to the minimal federal safety standards for these elements. So what's in a cigarette? There's all kinds of bad things. Nicotine is only one of them. Methanol, carbon monoxide. There's arsenic. There's methane gas. This is in the secondhand smoke. And then this slide is important because it just tells us about the life cycle of harm from tobacco use. So starting at the pregnant woman, we mentioned the low birth weight, the stillbirth, and neurological learning behavior problems, decreased lung growth. You have SIDS in the newborn, bronchiolitis, there's increased risk of meningitis. Children, don't forget about the fire-related injuries that can happen with the burning cigarette left in the house. Asthma, otitis media, only some of them. In adolescents, having a parent or sibling who smoked is going to increase your risk of being a smoker yourself. Then there's the rapid onset of nicotine addiction, and then there's all the adult diseases. And as pediatricians, even though we're not seeing the pregnant mom, if we can help and intervene with the young child and get the moms to quit, then the next pregnancy can be a smoke-free pregnancy. So we have, a role in that cycle, even if we're not directly dealing with the pregnant mom. She can get pregnant. Okay. Postpartum relapse to smoking. So we have to remember about that because we see these newborns and we can ask the mom if she is currently a smoker, and the answer is very likely to be no. But if we don't ask if she was a smoker prior to pregnancy or quit during pregnancy, then we will not be identifying the people who are at risk of postpartum relapse. And we know that 50 to 60% do return to smoking within a year. And that is very frustrating, and you might not get, if you ask the question, are you just a current smoker, you're not going to get that information. But if you find out that the mom had quit smoking prior to that pregnancy or during the pregnancy, then you'll know that this person is at risk for returning to smoking. And we really all understand what this is. She probably made some sort of pact with herself that she won't smoke during pregnancy, but then life moves on and all the stresses come back and she's no longer pregnant, and then it just kind of comes back. So we need to be very sensitive to these women who are at high risk for returning to smoking. And it's important also to talk about it, again, this is more the OBGYN, to talk about complimenting the mom who quit smoking during pregnancy. We can talk about that if we do newborn visits in the newborn nursery, give them more resources if they feel that they're going to be at risk of coming back to smoking, but being very complimentary about what she had done during her pregnancy. It's really important to not forget about this. The population risk, just to mention, there's a lot of cases of childhood asthma. In terms of asthma, smoke exposure both increases your risk of having asthma and definitely increases the risk of having persistent or hard to control asthma. Research has shown that you're going to need more inhaled corticosteroids at higher doses if your child is smoke exposed. And I personally have had patients whose parents have quit smoking or moved in with a different parent, and they had been on higher doses of Cloven or Q-Bar, and then all of a sudden they go from having moderate persistent asthma or severe persistent asthma to having intermittent asthma. They usually have some form of asthma when it's all over, but it's like easily controllable. They're not coughing all the time. They don't need daily medications. So that's the smoke contribution. It's due to chronic inflammation. Lower respiratory illnesses are more severe. Middle ear infections is a huge problem with smoke exposure. And we talked about low birth weight and SIDS. In terms of middle ear disease, maternal odds ratio of having middle ear disease is 1.62. It's basically because the kids, it's always a higher odds ratio for maternal smoking, probably because the kids spend more time around their mom than around their dad. But any household member still has an increased odds of having middle ear disease. If both mom and dad smoke, the risk of needing surgery for middle ear disease is like 1.86. It's almost double the risk. So that's really significant. For bronchiolitis, there was a large study of over 2,000 infants in Italy. 5.4% were hospitalized for bronchiolitis. The risk of getting hospitalized for bronchiolitis was, if you had prenatal exposure to tobacco, was 3.5 times, and postnatal, if you're exposed to 15 cigarettes a day, is about 1.7 times. So again, here's prenatal exposure and risk of hospitalization for bronchiolitis. Influenza, secondhand smoke exposed kids who were hospitalized for influenza had a much longer length of stay and much increased rates of PICU admissions, 7 times the baseline rate if you were secondhand smoke exposed. So you're going to get a lot of these diseases regardless, but then the way the disease manifests itself is going to be much worse. Again, probably because of the chronic inflammation of being smoke exposed. Asthma we mentioned, and we talked about increased need for inhaled corticosteroids, increased dose, and also related to readmissions for asthma. But there's a couple other things that I mentioned that you might not be aware of. Tobacco smoke exposures are associated with higher inflammation in kids, higher CRPs, lower HDLs, higher systolic blood pressure, and increased risk of metabolic syndrome. So it's working its way into your cardiovascular system, not just your respiratory system. So that's another thing to be thinking of. It also increases school absenteeism, sleep problems. We're not sure exactly how, hospitalizations, and we have no risk-free level of exposure. Children exposed also have increased risks of lung cancer, leukemias, luckily relatively rare, heart disease, lipid disorders, and metabolic syndrome we already mentioned, and becoming smokers themselves in terms of the negative role model. Also, just realize, as we mentioned before, that this is a health disparity. And so adult smokers spend the equivalent of 500 to 600 calories, like cost-wise, on food. So there are relationships between food insecurity and smoking. And we can get very blaming and say the parents spent that money that they would have had on food, on cigarettes. But going back to the beginning of my presentation, this is an addiction. So we need to view it in the context of addiction. And we mentioned the cognitive dysfunction too. So what is third-hand smoke? Has anybody heard of third-hand smoke? So third-hand smoke is a tobacco residue left on surfaces after smoking takes place. And then the particles can re-aerosolize and be inhaled. Nicotine can interact with nitrous oxide to form nitrosamines, which are actually carcinogens. So that's a picture of a wall, and they were like posters on the cleaner part of the wall, and the rest of it just got like the third-hand smoke or the chronic smoke. So, that's why like hotels don't want smoking in the hotel, because it just gets into the carpets, it gets into the drapes, and you can't really get rid of it. It's really terrible. I'll just state anecdotally, for me personally, I once went to a meeting, and for whatever reason, I decided to save money, and I didn't stay at the nicest hotel, and the hotel was in New Orleans that I stayed at had once been apartments where smoking was allowed, and I started the meeting with a cold, and I figured by the time the meeting was over, I'd be done with my cold because it doesn't take me that long to get rid of the cold. Well, the room stunk. There was no current smoking, but it was all third hand in the carpet. It was old in the curtains. It was everywhere. You could smell it. I really couldn't switch hotels because they were all booked up because it was a big AAP meeting. And as time went on, my cold got worse and worse and worse instead of getting better, which again, this is an N1 and I don't have control for myself, but I definitely blame the third-hand smoke that was in that room because I feel like I was having a constant exposure to it and it wasn't going away. So that's third-hand smoke. It can also react with ozone to form particulate matter, which is inhaled into lungs, causing inflammation. And off-gassing is continuous formation of gas from this third-hand smoke. It just keeps happening all the time. It's really, really hard to do research on it because it's really hard to isolate the third-hand smoke in humans from second-hand smoke because kids who are exposed to third-hand smoke are probably also exposed to second-hand smoke, and they probably also were exposed to tobacco in utero, so it's really hard to separate out those effects. Mice exposed to third-hand smoke, it's always easier to do this type of research in mice or rats. Mice exposed to third-hand smoke are more likely to develop cancer. Again, their lifespan is pretty short, so it's easier to do mice models. And in human studies, the residue can last for months. So we all know, and that's probably a good reason, just, hotels now try to be completely smoke-free, and it's in their best interest just because it's easier to keep the hotel clean. Oh, okay. So, before we go on to the MOC questions, I think I'm right on time here. So we'll take a couple of questions because the MOC questions will go really fast. Okay.
So the kids today, anybody under 20, they're not taking up smoking. They think that's a gross. Old people think they're all drooling.
They are drooling.
And we want to give them the most accurate information and not come across as like, reefer madness. So do we have any data of leaving aside the issue that a lot of people who vape are going to go on to smoke, but leaving that aside, if like say you picked up juuling when you were 18 and did it for 30 years, do we have any data on what the risks are?
Okay, so does everybody know what juuling is? Okay, so juuling is a form of e-cigarettes. Does everybody know what the e-cigarette is? It's a form of nicotine. It's you vaporize nicotine and then you inhale it. So it doesn't have the tobacco leaf. It's coming from like a liquid nicotine, although on the other hand, like you could put like marijuana extract in it too. Juul is a particular, Juul is a particular brand of this that looks like a flash drive that kids can stick and so it's charged, it literally is a USB port. So it's charged, like you can charge it through your laptop. It looks like a flash drive, so you can hear it in your pocket, and it's a little longer than a flash drive, but like the teacher would think it's like a longer flash drive. And then people put it in their collar and they can like vape on it during school, and it comes with a bunch of flavors. So it's, even though the company, which is like this big startup, Silicon Valley, says it was marketed to help smokers quit smoking, it comes in like these tutti-frutti flavors and like mellow, mango. So it's huge among more middle-class kids, opposed to the disparities we talked about smokers. So it's good that you asked that because it's an important topic. So in terms of those health risks, there's a couple of things. Number one, in Juul, the level of nicotine is like probably 5 times the level that you would see in a traditional e-cigarette. So the risk of addiction to nicotine for you is extremely high. People who've ever tried like a traditional e-cigarette, most of them are just trying it. Most of them do not turn out to like be using them all the time. But if you start a Juul, the risk, I just heard this yesterday, the risk of like daily use is like 75% of kids who've ever tried are like hooked right away. So you have the risk of nicotine addiction per se, which is like not good because you have developing brain and it's not good to be addicted to nicotine when you're like 16. Secondly, there's a huge risk of going on to traditional cigarettes because, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, the nicotine delivery to the brain in a traditional cigarette is like amazing, and it's probably better than a Juul. So once you get addicted to nicotine from the Juul, the chance that you're going to transition over to the stinky, smelly traditional cigarette is higher than those kids think because it's going to really give them a lot of bang for their buck. Now, what about the health effects? It looks like in terms of carcinogens, it's not nearly as high as traditional cigarettes. But in terms of inhaled particulate matter, that's going to cause a cascade to heart disease. And it's early, but from what I've seen, it's probably going to be just the same as traditional cigarettes in terms of heart disease and ischemic effects and stuff like that. Because there's a lot of particulate matter in that stuff. And that goes directly to the smoker. Now, in terms of secondhand vape, it's definitely not as bad as the traditional cigarettes. However, it depends how much is around you. So there isn't, if you have a Juul, nothing is coming off of it. Like you don't have an ashtray, like you don't have all that goo that you would have from a regular cigarette. But have you ever seen like these vape contests where these people are like vaping all the time? When those guys are together all the time and they hold it in their mouth and they put it out to the air, you can have really, really poor indoor air quality. So that's why like airports don't want people vaping, because if there's a whole bunch of people vaping around you and they hold it in their mouth and then they just put it out there, that can cause some of the same things that we talked about with the poor indoor air quality. But I'm really glad you asked that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I figured there probably wasn't a lot of long-term data. You probably don't know anything about the effects of like vaping while you're pregnant, do we?
Well, but wait a second. What we do know is that nicotine is really terrible when you're pregnant. Okay, so a lot of the effects that we talk about are nicotine mediated, and some of them, like nicotine replacement, is not so great to have when you're pregnant. So no, it's terrible to use when you're pregnant because the vasoconstriction of nicotine and the neurological effects are right there. So I would say flat out pregnancy is terrible. I mean, because a lot of that is definitely nicotine mediated. Okay.
So that's what I was going to ask, the nicotine chiclets or the patches or anything nicotine is really bad for pregnancy.
Well, I guess, if you're an OBGYN, you're going to have to do some risk reduction. So, okay, the cigarette has carbon monoxide. It's got a whole lot more than nicotine, but, for sure, an OBGYN, if he's faced with a mom who smokes like 4 packs of cigarettes a day or something like crazy versus nicotine replacement, the nicotine replacement is going to be better. But pregnancy per se is not a safe time for nicotine replacement as opposed to non-pregnancy where it's not so much the nicotine, it's all the other stuff. So it's relative. But again, if the woman can quit smoking without using any form of nicotine, she would be better off.
Have you looked at any of the vaping of the marijuana during pregnancy? Are those mothers getting higher concentrations? Because they think that vaping is safer. So, and marijuana has become medicinal in so many places. So, do you have any data yet about vaping the marijuana?
Well, I just heard a presentation about marijuana use during pregnancy per se, and not vaping marijuana, but any form of marijuana. And it's not great to see some of the effects. So I think the first thing that we need to do in the public health community is get rid of the idea that marijuana is medicinal during pregnancy, because some of the same stuff that we got in tobacco is what they found. Some of the lower IQ, some of the behavior problems, we're really way behind with this because it was illegal, so we weren't really talking about it. I don't know the difference between vaping marijuana per se, but marijuana is a substance, and using it in pregnancy is not medicinal. There is going to be effects right down the road. Any other questions? Okay, so the MSC questions. Which diseases, conditions, and offspring have been associated with smoking pregnancy? A, birth weight, prolonged C, prematurity, or D, all of the above. Approximately what proportion of mothers who smoke prior to pregnancy quit during pregnancy? 75, 50, 30, or 10? Smoking during pregnancy has been associated with SIDS in the offspring, but secondhand smoke exposure after birth has not been associated with this outcome. False. Exactly. And 50 to 60% of moms who return to smoking within a year return. And one more. Children exposed to secondhand smoke with lower scores in cognitive tests and worse in smoking.
I'm going to take it from here and talk a little bit about how we can have conversations with families a little bit more effectively. But just to kind of add a few more points to the e-cigarette stooling to kind of use in your minds. when you're having conversations is 1 Juul pod is equivalent to about 1 pack of cigarettes a day as we think about nicotine. So that can sometimes be a useful sort of aha moment for patients as they're hearing about it. And when we talk about e-cigarettes, and many people sort of purposely say, well, I'm looking for the ones that say no nicotine in it. And there's been some really nice studies that show that nearly half of those bottles are misrepresenting how much nicotine is in. And they're misrepresenting in the opposite direction. So they're saying 0% nicotine, and they have some amount, if not much more than whatever amount they do say. So again, those are just kind of helpful facts that may be useful in your conversations with families. But I'm not going to be doing a motivational one-on-one talk here because raise of hand, who's had conversations or presentations or trainings on motivational interviewing? For those of you who haven't, we're going to go over some tips, but I'm not going to make us start from, the top. But I think many of us still struggle. I still struggle with how do I incorporate this into a clinic? Especially a fast-paced appointment where I'm trying to be as effective as possible with this family who's in front of me today. And there are a lot of barriers sometimes that come up both for families as well as us when we're talking about and wanting to reach the subject of smoking cessation. It's not just lack of time, but sometimes we struggle with literally how do we have those conversations, how do we connect people to resources that they need when frankly, that parent may not necessarily be our patient, especially if we're not family practitioners. These may be brand new patients to your practice. This may be their first baby, and therefore you're just trying to now build your relationship and rapport with them, and you don't want to feel like you're starting off somehow alienating that family. The reimbursement, especially as we talked about, if the parent themselves isn't necessarily your patient, there's not very good reimbursement structure right now for the time one puts into having conversations about smoking cessation. And a lot of it is there's just so much information that many of us struggle with keeping up with it, especially as new stuff comes out on the market, like Juuls and Fixes and other e-cigarettes and those types of forms of smoking these days. The reality, luckily, is that we can be effective in our own clinics with as little as about 3 minutes of a visit. And I know you're already mentally calculating, saying that's like a third of my visit right there. But, I'll remind you that you're not going to solve every problem in that one visit. So it's a marathon. It is like this constant communication over the course of time. And luckily, especially for this particular population that we're talking about, this sort of first year of life, these are families you're going to see a lot. So you're going to have a lot of opportunities over the course of that year in particular to have little bits of this conversation that build on one another and hopefully help get that family closer to a really positive behavior change. Most people who are smokers know a lot of the information that Dr. Groner mentioned. And as Tara kind of mentioned yesterday at our keynote when we were talking about something completely different about vaccinations, that sort of inherently sort of reminds us of how much, when it comes to motivation for change, there's a component of it that's about feed me more information, but so much more about it is about what's motivating the underlying behaviors and how can we help address and help families figure out how to get past some of the challenges relating more to the psychosocial components of whatever behavior we're talking about, in this case, smoking cessation. The other good thing, just like we saw with immunizations yesterday, is most people cite their physician, their nurse, their clinician as one of the people that they really look towards and sort of heed their advice. So you can be a really potent motivator for change just by bringing it up, just for screening about it, just for asking about it and beginning that conversation to help them move towards that positive behavior change. And when I have a patient who says they've tried quitting 5 times and they haven't been able to do it, I'm like lighting up, because that just means we're that much closer to quitting. Because the more quit attempts they've had is one of the most likely things to show they're closer to actual ultimate success. It really does help, though, if we get involved in a patient's desire to try to quit smoking. So there are going to be many people out there that can quit smoking all on their own without any interference or us getting involved. 7 to 10% will. 13%, that number will jump to 13% if we are at least offering some brief messaging about counseling and smoking cessation. And that number can jump to up to 1/3 of patients can be more successful in quitting if we're really helping them with some of the recommended guideline treatments for smoking cessation, including getting them connected to more specific resources like QuitLine or potentially nicotine replacement options. For us as pediatricians that are in the clinic, and again, sometimes struggle with the fact that this may not be my patient, the mom or the dad or the grandma may not be my patient, there are certainly things that we all can be doing in our clinics. First and foremost is asking. And I think Dr. Groner brought up a really good point about asking, even if they're saying they're not a smoker now, were they a smoker before, during pregnancy, and did they quit? Great. But sort of keeping that as a really important risk factor that you're going to be able to follow up and ask about them, again, continuously looking for at least the risk for relapse and letting them know ahead of time that that sometimes can happen and we're here to help. The other pieces that we as pediatricians can be really effective with smoking cessation is counseling. And when I say counseling, I'm talking about really probably the most potent components that we are doing as providers with these patients is asking the types of questions that help elicit what's motivating some of that behavior so that we can start to help them think about those underlying motivators and how to overcome some of the challenges when they internally want to start to quit or cut down, but they're really struggling with how do I kind of get to that ultimate behavior that I'm reaching for. The third component that many of us may have experience with is some of the medication support options that are out there, including nicotine replacements, including other medications like Zyban and Chantix. But even if you're not able to do those medication options or nicotine replacement options, which many of them are available over the counter, you at least can begin to have that conversation with them so they realize that there are ways to help with some of those withdrawal effects that Dr. Groner mentioned that they're going to have based upon that nicotine addiction. And talk about how they could follow up with their own primary care doctor, how they could get some of these things over the counter and follow the directions over the counter, or get them connected to other resources that are available both nationally and in our state, like the Ohio QuitLine. And many of our hospitals these days have smoking cessation programs. Many of our insurers have smoking cessation programs that we can help at least facilitate or connect our families to help them on the road to smoking cessation. What we also do know from the literature is that pediatric interventions into parent smoking cessation are effective. Even small types of interventions, in the sense that all we're talking about is asking if they smoke and helping at least have a few minutes of a conversation about how we can help them be more effective in stopping smoke. Those types of interventions decrease cigarette smoke in the home, decrease nicotine levels in the home, increase at families saying at least no smoking in the home, so that we're starting to limit that second and third hand smoke exposure that we're talking about as well, and increasing in quit rates. And you know, as pediatricians, like our bread and butter is prevention. So smoking cessation, Dr. Groner did a wonderful job of just showing how much downstream effect we can have by trying to help a family create a smoke-free environment for themselves, for their children, for their future children, for all. So, you know, this is right up our alley in terms of prevention. Like I said, I'm not doing a motivational 101, but there are definitely lots of different ways in which you've probably seen in the literature in your own training about how to have behavior change types of conversations with families. The 5 A's is one that's often referred to in the smoking world: motivational interviewing, self-management. They all kind of have the same feel to them. They're about, you know, these very patient-centered conversations, what their readiness for change is, what motivates the behavior that they are involved in, how to have a conversation, not a download of information to them, but a conversation that helps them get closer and closer to that ultimate stage of readiness for action. Our goal, though, is really to open up those conversations, to offer information. And offer is kind of a key piece, because sometimes you're going to have families that aren't ready for that offer, and that's okay. Because like I said, it's those small conversations over time that really do make a big difference as well. Helping them kind of navigate where their motivation lies in terms of quitting smoking, or at least reducing their smoking, and then helping them think through some of the obstacles, especially as you're hearing some of the psychological or psychosocial aspects to how they smoke, why they smoke, so that you can build up their ability to be successful in whatever goals they're setting, and to build within them the confidence that makes them be able to set bigger and bigger goals to get closer to true ultimate smoking quitting cessation. It's ultimately, though, the patient's role in terms of deciding when they're ready to change. But if you have someone that you're seeing that's at this point seemingly in some place like a pre-contemplation stage and I'm not ready to quit, that's fine. Our goal is not that we're going to see everyone in action stage, is that we're trying to move them, trying to just spark those little moments of thinking that help move them a little bit closer to thinking about why smoking and my smoking behavior may be ready for me to change. So, step 1 is asking. And that in particular is what this learning collaborative is about, is helping you guys as pediatricians, for those of you who aren't already signed up to be part of the Smoke Free For Me collaborative, you always can. So stick around if you want to after this session too, because this is the jumping off point for this. But it is a program that's designed to help with this, the ask, the screening part of, you know, do you have a family here where there's smoke in the house? And then building on that ask with conversations and questions and resources that help families get closer to smoking cessation. There are lots of different ways that you could be asking, even if you're not doing the collaborative with us, both formally and informally. So there are some formal screening options that many of you may actually already have implemented in your own clinics through your EMR systems. Many of us sometimes have a little marker where it's already been sort of put in our template. Like I said, anyone who's going to be part of the collaborative, there's a very specific screening tool that we've been using that very nicely and easily gets sent, and we collect the data from that. And the one example of where we may be able to do some extra reimbursement for pediatricians who are talking about smoking cessation with family members is on the screening component, because one of the CPT codes, and this isn't specific to smoking, but are CPT codes related around parent-focused risk screenings. And we're talking about often on the order of $4 or $5 per screening tool, but again, it's something that you could be thinking about building into your own clinic processes that capture that work that you're doing and hopefully giving a little bit added reimbursement for it. You could also be doing that screening in a much more informal way, whether it be as the MA or the nurse is checking the patient in and asking about smoking in the home, or you as the provider as you're walking in and asking about it, and then capturing that information somehow in your documentation. But once you've screened, or to Dr. Groner's point, once you've screened and asked, did you quit when you were a smoker in pregnancy too, as a sort of just keeping that in the back of your mind. Then the next step is, if they themselves are smokers, or potentially if there's other people in the home that are smokers, assessing where their motivation and readiness for change is. And this is where, again, it's just asking a few key questions, not all of these questions, I just kind of threw out a few different ones out there. So throughout these next few slides, you'll see some things in orange, and those are kind of questions that you could think about using as a jumping off point for these conversations. But the ultimate goal is trying to get a little bit of a sense of why they smoke, where they smoke, the kind of social parameters under which they smoke. That helps you, one, get a sense of their readiness and their motivation potentially for change. And it helps give you a little bit more information, so as you get further along, if you end up in that visit getting further along into the conversation about, how can we help them with their ultimate goal of wanting to cut down, what are the things around them that make that challenging, so you can kind of problem solve with them ahead of time to maximize the success that they'll have. Some of you may have seen things like these readiness rulers. Think of them like those pain, happy face, sad face kind of things. I don't personally use a readiness ruler in my practice, but it's just a way to kind of really label objectively sort of where they are in that stage of readiness, anywhere for I'm not even thinking about it, stop talking to me about it sort of thing, to I'm ready for change, or I'm even already stopped smoking and I'm trying to keep and maintain that level of readiness. The third step that hopefully all of us at least get to is some brief amount of intervention. And again, at least from the literature standpoint, even being able to build in a little bit of conversation, a few sentences about smoking and their risks, and how we're here to help when and if they're ready and motivated to change, can overall increase tobacco abstinence rates for our families. So these little conversations add up over time. They may not feel nearly as sort of yay for us at the time of the clinic that we, because they're not necessarily saying they're going to do a quick date right then, but they're building up over time. And these are families that hopefully you're going to have a relationship with, where you can have those conversations over time. And this is really ultimately the minimal amount we want to be able to offer families where they're smoking in the home. Some keys to this kind of brief intervention component, these like 1 or 2 sentences that at least you get to be able to kind of say and offer to families is, offer if there is information that they want, or perhaps give them some of the little tidbits that Dr. Groner was mentioning about how smoking may be affecting their loved ones, both now and in the future. But also be clear about you as the doctor, you as the nurse, you as the person who, just like them, wants to help give their child as healthy of a life as possible. Be clear that you recognize and want them to recognize that quitting smoking and having a smoke-free home is the most important thing for their baby's health and for their own health. And that piece of adding not just about the baby, but how you're caring about their health as well, really does resonate with families. And we heard that a lot from actually some of our Wave 1 participants as part of the collaborative too. It was that piece in particular that seemed to be a good hook for some families. It wasn't just about the baby, it's I care about you too. We know we all do care about them, but sometimes just saying that out loud really helps families understand that even more tangibly than they may have otherwise. Again, just sort of remind them even if you're not ready now, I'm always here to help. We always can get you connected with someone and some resources that are going to make this a little bit easier. And follow up. Check in with them again. You're going to see them again in the next few months for their next checkup. So it's a wonderful opportunity to check up with them again in the next few visits. And there are some resources that are in your packets that were mentioned in the beginning that we used in the first round of the collaborative that were really helpful for families, whether they were sort of in that range of, I'm not ready to stop, quit smoking at all, and just being able to have a handout that they can walk out with some added information. Or they were in a little bit more readiness to change. Again, slightly different handouts for each one that you can use, as well as a handout on some of the smoking myths. And then you also have one on e-cigarettes in there as well. All of those are resources that you can, at the very least, that may be the end of your conversation, give them one more thing for added information as they leave, and then follow up with them again at the next visit. I didn't do that. So, step 4, if you do have more time, or frankly, even if you don't have more time, but you're ready for a little bit deeper conversation, then this is a really potent opportunity for a little bit longer intervention option with them. And again, it goes back to recognizing where they are in their stage of readiness so that you can help them move forward. They're not necessarily going to be in the action phase, but it's how do we get them a little bit further along, a little bit closer to action and actual behavior change. So again, the orange sentences are the ones that may be, phrasing that you can use, or at least use as a jumping off point, but you want to get to a point where you're asking the types of questions that help you figure out where their motivation lies. You want them to help develop their own discrepancy. That's just kind of the fancy way of saying, when any of us say, I know I should be exercising more, but I just don't have time. And like that sort of back and forth that mentally many of us go through with any type of behavior change. How do we help them kind of wrestle that out in the open so they can sort of get themselves closer to I get the part that I need to exercise more, or I get the part that I need to stop smoking. Okay, now what's my next step? How do I actually accomplish that? And that also helps you build on that self-confidence too. So as you're also gathering information that gives you a sense of where they're smoking, who they're smoking with, what kind of gets them smoking. When it's one of those really stressful days, or every time her sister comes over, that's when they tend to smoke. Those little pieces of information that frankly may just be the natural conversation you're having. So you're gathering that type of information just with your normal chit-chat that you're having with the patient is helping you think about what are maybe some of the challenges that they may come across so that you can kind of bring that up to them in the future. Okay, now I hear that you're ready to quit and you're saying you want to cut down. I also hear that you just said every time your sister comes over, that's when you tend to smoke the most. How do you see yourself, what are you going to be able to do? What do you think is going to be helpful at those times when your sister comes over? So that you can kind of think through that ahead of time and build in their likelihood of being a little bit more successful in whatever goal they've set for themselves, and build that self-confidence for themselves as they meet that goal. They can reach for a bigger goal the next time around. Same sort of a little bit elaboration on those same sorts of things here, but again, thinking about, asking about, what have they done before in terms of their quit attempts? What did they think was the reason why it didn't work as well for as long? Because again, that gives you a good sense of what were some of the challenges and barriers they had last time that you could potentially help them think about to figure out how they can get around those challenges the second time or the third or fourth time around. And you're really helping them with problem solving. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. There are other, again, as we think about MI 101, there are lots of mnemonics that help us remember cool little ways that we can think about how to have conversations with families or patients about any sort of behavior change. rule, ors, reads, all of these are maybe ones that are familiar to you. But the underlying concept, I think, is, again, this is a patient-centered conversation. You're eliciting information from them, and they're the ones, though, that are really coming up with the information that you're just helping to kind of feed back to them. Say, I'm hearing you say this, or I'm hearing you struggle with this. How do you kind of see yourself being able to kind of get around that particular struggle, so that you can help them build their own confidence that they're the ones that came up with the strategies that end up being really successful for them, putting the strength in their hands. It's not in your hands, it's in the patient's hands. That goes to some of the other resources that you guys have in your packets. These were used and were helpful in wave 1 of the Smoke-Free Collaborative. Again, these are more directed to you as the provider, to help you with maybe the way you phrase certain things or questions that you may be able to ask the patient, depending on where they are in their stage of readiness. That will help you move them hopefully further along in their desire and need for smoking change. And then finally, step 5, they're ready. They're ready for behavior change, whether that be cutting down or whether that be quitting all total. These are all good, positive steps. So congratulate them. I'm so glad to hear you're ready to cut down on juuling or make a smoking ban in your home, or you fill in the blank. Let's make sure that we've sort of thought through what the obstacles may be so we can help you be as successful as possible. And here's the other key. Let's see how it's going when we see you back in your month or 2 or whatever that time frame is, and don't let it be too long. So 2-3 months, luckily for us, in this 0 to 12-month range that we're talking about, at least oftentimes with these infants, it doesn't go very long before we're seeing them again. But that follow-up is really key as well. So you can, they, 1, know that you're still with them. 2, that you can hear what some of the obstacles they may have had, so you can help them be more successful the next time around too, if they had any struggles. And to 3, if they've been able to accomplish that, you get one more opportunity to really congratulate them and say, let's take it to the next step. What are you ready for next, given all the success that you've been able to do so far? So be really specific about, or help them be really specific about what goal they want to set for themselves. It doesn't need to be big, do small, so they can build that confidence over time. Play a little bit of devil's advocate, again, as you're thinking about what those challenges could be, so you can help them think through those obstacles ahead of time and be able to be more successful with whatever goal they're setting. And make sure you have a really explicit follow-up plan with the patient. And small steps count. So again, even if it's not, I'm ready to quit today, but it's some step along this ladder, we've seen already from Dr. Groner's conversation how important any of those little steps can be in terms of reducing risk for both the patient as well as the children in the home. There are lots of free resources, certainly in the state of Ohio. If you're going to join and be part of our learning collaborative, we give them to you. So that makes it even that much easier. We'll make it sort of streamlined. But the Ohio Tobacco Quit Line is run through the Department of Health. It's a free service for all patients. They can either access it by phone or by a website, or there's a Quit Line referral form in your packets that you can always copy and have available in your clinic. Some clinics found it really helpful to have part of it pre-filled out so they could easily just grab it for families that were ready to have a referral to the Quit Line, and they could fax it directly from the clinic themselves if the family is ready for that. There's also, other national resources available out there as well. So the NIH has a texting type of counseling program that's available. Again, families themselves can go online, or if you had that time, or perhaps you have an MA or someone after the visit, can walk the family through getting them signed up for the texting options or the Ohio Quit Line. The nice thing about the Ohio Tobacco Quit Line is for some patients, they may be eligible for some free nicotine replacement therapy as well with that referral, usually about 2 months first, and only if they're over 18. So we've heard some really wonderful feedback from our Wave 1 participants, and I've kind of mentioned a lot of it during points in this conversation, but it's really those baby step conversations that in the big overall picture is what's going to help our patients be more successful and us feel more successful in our conversations about smoking cessation or any sort of behavior change. And this was a quote from one particular Wave 1 participant. But, you know, what really kind of struck her is, you know, not everyone was ready to quit smoking at that particular moment in time. But for those families in particular that were, by simply being the one to ask about smoking, she was able to really connect them with the resources that help them really create a much healthier home for her children and future children as well. So, you know, sometimes it's just being at the right place at the right time. And we're not going to know we're at the right place at the right time if we're not at least screening and asking these families as we're seeing them in our clinics. So, MOC questions, 5 of them. Remember, you need to write your numbers down because your MOC form only has 5. So this will be question number 6. Just write on your blue sheet 6 through 10. We're going to write in the other answers. So question number 6 is going to be a true or false. Screening for smoke exposure and offering brief motivational interviewing can reduce nicotine exposure and increase quit rates. Yep, true. Number 7, some of the tools that we use in motivational interviewing or self-management or whatever you want to call it include lots of different things. All of these except building confidence, utilizing empathy, helping them explore discrepancy, arguing with the patient over the facts, or assisting the patient in exploring motivation, arguing over the facts. Not going to be helpful, especially if your patient's a teen, so just don't go there. Number 8, true or false, smoking cessation efforts by pediatricians will lead to fewer cigarettes smoked, more cigarette bans in the home. True. Question number 9, smoking cessation resources and supports are available all over the place, including from you, from their own provider that you can help them connect to, the Ohio Quit Line, texting services like smoke-free text, over-the-counter nicotine replacement, community smoking cessation, all of the above, plus more that aren't even on this list that you may know about already. And number 10, true or false, as little as 3 minutes can make a difference. True. Thank you.
Everyone, we had a surprise with pastries that we didn't know we were getting today, so feel free, filter up, grab yourself a pastry if you'd like one.
So, again, my name is Mike Dillon. I'm the medical director for the Smoke-Free Families program, and I'm also the president of the Ohio chapter. Thank you again to our 2 speakers that just went over the MOC2 stuff. They made our job easier as we talk about this program because you already know of the risks and the whys, and you're going to learn a little bit more about the hows in this program. I really want to thank our project team. This team is unbelievable, and they really get a lot of stuff done. So, as I said, I'm the medical director. Melinda Mojave-Gittins, Cincinnati Children's, Dr. Groner, and Dr. Dritz are our content editors, really help us put together the program and the packets. Kristen Fluid, who is our program manager, she makes sure the day-to-day operations run smoothly. If you guys have any problems along the way, she's the best person to contact. Sam, who you will hear from later on, is going to talk about really just the data and the quality improvement aspect. Paul Dawson does a lot of our IT, and you'll hear more about our GRC team. Kristen's in the back, and our GRC team is really helpful with making the data analysis and that portion easy for all of you. So these are our partners. We couldn't get this job done without our partners. Our state sponsors, so this has been funded by Ohio Department of Health and MedTap dollars, and it was administered by the Government Resource Center from the Ohio College of Medicine. And they're the ones, as I said, really capture a lot of our data. This is just a disclosure from the state sponsors that this information is from us. It really doesn't reflect how our state feels. Our practices that are here, instead of going through each of the practices, you can see your names up there. If you're not up there, please tell Kristen so that we can get your name up there and you can get all of the information.
And I've had a few folks who have approached me. We are so excited to have you join us, and so I'm going to make sure I just get your contact information when this is over, and I'll be in touch next week.
So I don't really like to put people on the spot, but I will just say Dr. Hardy was one of our Wave 1 practices. Is there any words of wisdom before we get started that you want to tell the group?
It was really easy to do. It was great. It was valuable. You should do it.
Here you go. Here's I'm just kidding.
I think Dr. Hollis, am I correct, from West Hospital? Yes.
That's right. You actually, how did you feel about the program when you went through it?
I thought it was, it provided a lot of resources to help get everyone involved, so it was really helpful.
Great. So I'm going to just talk very briefly about this program. You all heard in the earlier MOC2 talk that smoking cessation is important because smoking causes significant morbidity and mortality. So for any of you that don't know, I am an injury prevention person. I've done that for over 20 years, and it's because it causes significant morbidity and mortality. Smoking is right up there with that. And so anything that we can do to make our children and our families healthier is our job, and that's what we should be doing. And one of the problems is that a lot of parents might quit smoking when they're pregnant, and then with the stresses of childbirth and having children in the house, they begin to smoke again and they relapse. And unfortunately, many of us concentrate on development, nutrition, immunizations, and we don't think about the parent, and we don't think about smoking in the home, and we're just not screening for it. Or if we're screening for it, it's like, you don't smoke, or fill this out, and then we're not even doing anything because we don't know much of the resources. That's the purpose of this program. And so we want to make it so that screening is easy, that we can easily give you information to counsel, and that it is easy to give them referrals to help them quit, as well as we follow them over time, and you can actually see behavior change, which is really exciting. So this is a 7-month quality improvement collaborative. We're really concentrating on parents with children 0 to 1 year of age, and we're really concentrating on that caregiver that smokes. However, we do address other family members that might smoke in the home. And all this is screen, intervene, and then as you heard from the testimonials, submitting the form is really easy. The GRC group is outstanding in getting us data, and then we all work together to be able to figure out how do we improve upon the work that we're currently doing. This is the screening tool. It's front and back of a page. It is really simple. We're hoping today, if there are any questions or problems or how to problem solve, we can get that out really quickly. And so if you have questions, and some questions might be, how did you handle it if the caregiver can't read? How did you administer this tool? Okay, and so you'll hear as we go on, other practices can tell you how they did it, and that's the whole idea of a learning collaborative is one practice that's struggling, every practice has those same questions, and as we all work through these problems together, it's the easiest way to be able to be successful. The intervene, it's really to go over the 5 A's as you heard about. I will tell you that one of the changes that we made in this wave, which is a little bit different, is we gave you specific talking points for each of the stages of change. We found that, a family might, or a caregiver might be in the contemplation stage versus the action stage. What really should we be saying and what works? And we actually gave you talking points for each of those, really to make it more successful and hopefully to encourage greater change in behavior because we're enticing families based on their readiness.
And then to submit the screening tool, it is very easy. The only thing that I will recommend to you after doing many of these QI projects is you are all here because you are invested, but it's not about you, it's really about a team effort. And learn to use the ancillary staff in your office, learn to use everybody to make you successful. The more that you streamline things, the more that it's going to work. In my injury prevention world, so if there is active change, so I need you to put a seatbelt on, I need you to do some action, it's very difficult. If it's passive, such as like Tylenol caps, it's always going to be there. That's what you want for this work. It's really, I give it to them in the waiting room, they fill it out, it's discussed. Someone puts in my box, this is what I need to talk about, I get rid of the tool. It's done every time, it's done seamlessly, it'll make your life a lot easier, and you'll be a lot more successful. All right, so we have two ideas of program outcomes. One are our quality improvement, the other is our research. These are our quality improvement goals. One is we would like you to use the tool more than 90% of the time with caregivers. As I said, it is not that hard once it's streamlined. If you sit there and you say, oh, well, this time I'll do it here, and this time, and you try and haphazardly do it, you won't be as successful. To get to greater than 90%, you really need to find a way to put it into practice. We want you to not only screen, but implement the 5 A's more than 90% of the time. We have some safe sleep screening, mainly because smoking cessation is important, but also to prevent infant mortality. Safe sleep is really one of the main problems. I just saw a study out from one of my friends recently that #1 cause of death in kids under 1 year of age is inappropriate sleeping and safe sleep. So this is something that we can easily attack. This is the right population. That's why we have this in the screening tool. More than 90% of smokers will be screened for their readiness, and that resources will be provided to them. And it's really incredible that in wave 1 we found, although people were screening and giving the 5 A's, we weren't having the resources provided as much. We're really hoping that in this wave we will understand if a family needs it, we really should be providing those resources to the family. And then we have research outcomes for this. These are not things that any of you have to worry about. These are things that you're just going to be told. And this is really on the follow-up. We want to look at the reduction of self-reported smoking exposure. So how much of a reduction of smoke is the child having based on our discussions with families? We're also going to look at quit line referrals, and then hopefully about families that quit. You can see from the results of our first wave, the screening tool uptake, is easily used in practice. I mean, just look in the first month, people are using it more than 80% of the time. So it's really simple to get into your practice, and you should be able to do this very easily. This should not cause you any angst in any way. So cessation resources provided. As you can see, we were having a little bit of a difficult time of getting those resources provided to families. So we're really hoping that in this wave, when you recognize that there's a problem and that the 5 days are gone through, you could sit there and say, it looks like you need some resources, and provide them and check off that box. And then the use of the 5 A's with smoking caregivers, you can see that we got to about 60 to 70% of the time, but we're truly hoping to get to more than that with this second wave. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Sam, and she's going to talk to you about really how to implement the tool and kind of the data collection sheet.
Hello everyone, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So, in each of your packets, there is a screening tool, so you can kind of look through this as I go through the slides. It's a little easier to read. It's this red sheet, front and back, and there's also the front sheet that the parents complete, that's landscape. So the pro of this, as you can see, everything is Scantron, so filling it out with a black or blue ballpoint ink pen or pencil, and just doing that. That's pretty simple, short and sweet. As long as they entirely complete the bubble. So there's a nice little, yes.
Can this by chance be incorporated into like an electronic check-in?
I'm sorry,
We use the Freeja pad. It's a that they check in with, and we have our InChat on it and our ASQ developmental screens on it. Can this be put in?
Do you get PDFs or can you print that off? Because we fax and scan it to the GRC. Is there any way that can happen? Because I think if you put it in there, as
Yeah.
long as it can be
I mean, it's, yeah, because
transmitted.
it's usually transmitted automatically into our medical records, so then we can print that off, but.
If it can be printed off,
Okay.
or even put in a PDF and
Yeah.
you do it both those ways to get it to the GRC.
Because then we could just have it automatically come up for everyone.
And then it's part of your office as well, so you can already have that covered.
Yeah,
You
so
do-
let's follow up, like next week, and let's, see if we can, first of all, get it in there, and then get it printed off, and then get it faxed or uploaded in, and check to see if everything will read.
Okay.
Yes.
Are these in different languages?
So we recently have just gotten quite a bit of the tool and the resources translated into several languages. So yes, we do have some, and we're always taking information of other languages that we need and passing that on to our partners who do the translations.
Will you guys, do you need to ask you specifically to get them in other languages?
No, so all of that we'll be sending out to all the Wave 1 and Wave 2 practices. And then if other folks are interested, if you can just email me or give us a call at the chapter and we'll get those to you.
What languages do you have?
Kristen, can you remind me what languages we've gotten at this point?
Right now we have Burmese and Nepalese. Those are the two. Spanish is definitely.
We're working on Spanish, I believe. Don't think we have Arabic.
No, we can certainly, request that.
Yeah, if there are specific ones, let me know those and we can pass those along and request them.
Russian, or?
The government resource center. Any other questions on the screening tools? Okay, so as long as those bubbles are completed, that's kind of the main way that we read the data, so you don't have to manually enter anything, and then they are scanned and faxed to us, so it's more succinct and simple than some of our other collaboratives have been in terms of getting data. Team approach, if you heard me speak on the pre-work phone calls, and we'll kind of chat about it today as we discuss our office flows around your pre-existing screening tool processes, but there is, the caregiver section, which is the whole front page, and then the first half of the back page. And then you have the nurse and MA scoring section, which is the first column of the provider portion of the tool. And then you, as the physician or the nurse practitioner, will complete the steps that are denoted as advise, assist, and arrange. So you have a series of people that are going to be involved in this that will look at your pre-existing screening tool processes and what you're going to do for this tool to get everyone on the same page and passing off the baton.
So what has the feedback been from caregivers from this out? I'm just noticing the other screens that are happening that first year of life.
So current practices, would you like to comment on that?
We haven't had any problems. We're giving people just a big pile of paper anyway, and I think they're just used to it. So our patients kind of have Stockholm syndrome. I have to flip flop to get out of here. So, but we haven't had a lot of trouble getting people on for a long time in our office too, so they have lots of time to kill.
We've had our MAs go through the paperwork, not just this, but the other stuff that they have at the visit, and make sure everything's filled out and talk them through it if it's not done.
And then in terms of those that are non-smokers, it's really short and sweet. It's just those first 10 questions. And then for any repeat encounters, they only have to answer questions 1 through 3, and then to screen those, and then you kind of have the information that you can augment and update based on previous and subsequent visits.
So the question is that besides selecting doing the head screen, watch out, 4-month-old, they're done for immunization, talk and everything. How long does it take for you to finish, and how long is your visit? How much time you spend it? Because nowadays you're worried more about breastfeeding than the quality.
It's because it's very quick. So first of all, we found only about 10 to 20% that are coming in are actual smokers. So if they're not smoking, this form is incredibly quick. It's boom, boom, and we're done. So of those other ones, you're actually now going to spend a little bit of time discussing smoking cessation with them. I agree that yes, you're going to spend a little more time, but I would also say that because of the morbidity and mortality of smoking, it's something that we should be doing, and you're given all the resources and the easy way to do it, so the actual amount of time that you're going to put into it is very minimal.
I just brought up because I'm practicing away, and more than 90% of the time the population bounds. Actually, Now they all have started using marijuana after it's a medical marijuana coming, they smoke it to marijuana. But I was smoking, it was helping with my nausea and pain. So that's what I was asking, because this is my practice and I do all the time. I would love to participate in this. I've done two PR projects with AAP guys and I will come to do this one also, because I probably have more data. And this is what my standard practice is, and I talk to them all the time. Why they come in, they recommend after that. So,
Nobody get credit though. I think that a couple other things that are really fascinating is one, that you think that the percentages might be 60% or 90%, now you clearly are going to get data. Two, you're also going to get to see data of behavior change as we follow families, and you're also going to get a lot of resources to be able to help families. So there's a lot of benefits of just the participation, and it's really a short course of 7 months that you work on it. So.
And Dr. Decker? Dr. Decker?
I'm not right.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I just wanted to mention too, to your question, one thing we have heard from several of the Wave 1 practices is that they are sort of much more prepared and ready when they go into the room because they have information of the smoking and what's happening, and so they go in prepared, and then as they're doing the exam, they start the talking, and so while it does add some things, there's some ways that it can make it a little more efficient, and you can kind of hit those really important things once you know that, you know what's going on.
So one of the things that we and Dr. Dritz will cover in a later section is how to fit this into the counseling component and how to use some of the strategies she previously discussed so you can do it during the physical exam and kind of overcome some of those challenges.
So you're in the waiting room. So how do you determine, does everybody fill this out of a certain age group, even the non-smokers?
Yep.
And then,
But it's not just 0 to 12 months.
0 to 1.
0 to 1, non-smokers 2.
Yep.
And then,
At every well visit.
okay, and then the nurse MA directs the MD whether they need to.
Yep. And so, did you participate or are you new to joining? Okay, so one of the things that we did cover on the pre-work phone calls, and we can certainly pass that on to you, is we're working on office flows. So our next conversation will be how can we configure this into what we're currently doing and how we can utilize the different people. And then I'll also be going over who does what in each section, which handouts you can have at the ready when you go into the room. So that will be covered here, and then hopefully we can have a conversation about these types of things that you guys are bringing up, because I think this is going to be the meat of what we'll be talking about in a couple minutes. Yeah.
Actually, the biggest weird problem we ran into with this forum was that people lied on it. Like, they would put no, but then our nurse also, asked them if they smoke, and they told her yes. Or they would put no, and I would walk in the room, and you could smell it, and there's cigarettes in the back bag, and I'd be like, okay, y'all, come on. So then, half the time I was changing it, but then they wouldn't have filled this stuff out. So, yeah, that was the biggest weird issue we ran into. Yeah. I don't know if they think that because this looks so official that maybe like the government is tracking them.
Oh, yes. Okay. So Dr. Gittleman had already discussed what our SMART aims were, and we chatted about these a little on our pre-work phone call. But what we're really trying to do is incorporate this screening intervention into all of your well child visits birth through 1 year of age, and make sure that 90% of the caregivers who screen positive by the screeners that we'll note here, and I'll highlight those again as we progress a little further, are receiving the intervention. And the intervention that you're working on is solely on this backside of the sheet with the provider section. So are you advising appropriately based on the level of readiness? Are you assisting them, and are you arranging proper care for this family member? And then the second one is looking at offering caregiver referrals to the Ohio Quit line. So taking it to that point where the family who is ready to quit, and you have that screening question indicated here for the caregiver that's slowly presenting in your office. So you're faxing in referrals potentially for those individuals that are present. You can send home information for those that are not present to bring home to other smokers in the household. But for the purposes of what we're monitoring with the second specific aim, based on that individual's level of readiness, then going through advising appropriately, assisting, and if they are ready, You're going to offer them that they would like to take that next step and be referred to the Ohio Quitline. You'll work on completing that paperwork with them and provide some information. So that's one part that we'll be looking at in the course of your office flow of how you're going to handle that. So screening positive looks a little different than those that don't screen positive for smoking, and how you can handle resources and distribution of stuff for the Ohio Quitline. And then the third and final thing is providing smoking cessation information and resources to 90% of caregivers to support other individuals in the home. So that question 10, do other individuals or anyone else smoke or vape around the baby? That's what you're going to use to help lead this measure. And then you'll take the final row of your provider section where it says yes, someone else smokes in the home. You're discussing and giving handouts to that presenting caregiver in your office to bring back to the home to give to those individuals that are smoking around the baby. We have one of the goals that Dr. Gilliland mentioned, that we want to get this to all of our well child visits with the goal of making sure we kind of reach 90%. This Scantron, the sheet goes with your Scantron, so it helps us capture the denominator. What population of individuals did you see over a certain period of time to give this screening tool to? So you'll just complete this with the date, who you are, who's submitting the data, if you're faxing it or scanning it, letting us know the number of pages and data collection forms that will be there. And then we really use this section of the tool to know how many well child visits you saw, and of those well child visits, how many got this screening tool. So you'll look at the time frame, and then you'll note, I had 25 well child visits, and you faxed us 20 forms. So we know you saw that proportion of children, and they received this tool.
And just so you know, most folks in wave 1 were doing that weekly. So they would collect the tools over the course of a week. They had a process for that, where they're storing it, who's in charge, kind of all that, and then those all would come in a back sheet, usually on a weekly basis.
And data submission will be covered.
Not today, but that next week.
Yeah, so we'll kind of go through how to explain how you submit your data and all of that process.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
The other practices sign that you have multiple providers in the office participating, is it easier to just do one per provider, or do it?
One batch per provider?
Yeah.
You can, I think you can batch as many forms, it doesn't matter. So as long as the provider's initials are noted on this back side of the tool, we'll know who it is, and you can just lump all together.
And I would recommend that of any of you, because once you're implementing this into your office and you're using it, why not have all of your providers do it? Because they might as well get credit. It's already being put into practice, and it's the hardest lift is getting it into the office and used consistently.
Providers, nurse practitioners, what's the motivation? Can we get into some of
So we have several nurse practitioners who are doing wave 1. My understanding from what they have told me is they are able somehow to submit something and they get some credit for it. But they sort of have their own process with their nursing board, I think, that they submit that. But we have had several in wave 1 that have done it.
We've done other collaboratives where nurses have their QI credit. Yeah, I can't remember the process that they go through, but they can't submit it for credit.
Please have questions about that, can we send it to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the caregiver section begins as they read the instructions on how to complete the form. The main thing here is just making sure that caregivers and you as providers completely fill in the bubble. That's what's going to help get high quality data, and the system will read it appropriately. As Dr. Hardy had mentioned, sometimes they give inaccurate responses, and you can smell smoke or you see cigarettes. It may be helpful to just use pencils, so if you do have to erase, you're not having to white out, but you can use blue or black only as well. Okay, so the screen tool itself, and we kind of covered this as we answered some questions. We have demographics, and this allows us for some of those research-related questions to match individuals to see if they've had any small incremental changes in their behavior or their number of cigarettes or drinks that they vape, to calculate that information. These are our screener questions. So does the person that is at the office visit, are they smoking themselves? Does anyone else in the home smoke? And then question 8 was specifically at that safe sleep question. see what type of reduction we've seen in the number of cigarettes that someone has smoked, or the vapes, cigars, and black miles, kind of the whole gamut. And this is also kind of a process check too. So as Dr. Hardy also mentioned, they may not express that they are smokers, but then you find out that they are, so helping complete the rest of the form and having that information for you as your counsel.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's a cigarette?
Sorry.
What is a cigarette? It says on the bottom left of the panel, you've just on cigarette.
Oh, yeah. So it's a C instead of a G.
So then should that say e-cigarettes then? Because you already have cigarettes at the top.
Yeah, it should be e-cigarettes.
E-cigarettes and vape.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
And then
I thought maybe it was a candy, like, cigarette, cigarette, I don't know.
and then also looking to see for the individual that's presenting, and then for others in the homes, what some type of equipment testing has been, if they ever have, if they have successfully. And you can use this not only at that first time that you're counseling the family using the school, but at subsequent visits. So you have a whole bunch of resources at your fingertips about information of where that family's at, and how they smoke, and any input attempts that they have made.
Question.
Yes.
Do parents complain, I mean, they did it 2 months, 4 months, and they're not smokers, about keep having to fill it out?
It depends on the population. You said you haven't had too much, but you
Not, well, no, but now that we've been doing it for longer, we're starting to get a few people like, done this already. So.
Does that mess up your data collection then, if you have people who aren't filling it out for all the business the first year?
So we try to encourage as much as we can to have families complete the tool, and especially if they're not smokers, that they only have to do 5 questions or 6 questions. For the smoking individuals, we use strategies that we come up with to help.
So we've encouraged practices to do PDSAs around that. So are there particular messages that you give to families that then, they're more willing to accept it? If you talk about, we know we ask you these questions every time, but it's because smoke exposure is such a significant impact for your child. We give them a little candy if they do. So we try to work around that. Unfortunately, we've heard a bit of that, but not too much, and we've made it so that, again, if they're not smoking, it's a click through. It's a 3 question and you're done. And because the data system does match based on some of those key identifiers at the top, if we had that, we're able to, keep track. But we also, talk to them about what we're looking for, so that we are, we're wanting to see if we can help you reduce how much you're smoking, and that's why we ask about this every time and collect this important information.
If you think about it, it's a 7-month collaborative, right? So the most that they're going to fill it out is 2 other times compared from that first time. And so it's the second time, if they said, we filled this out already, we say, well, we want to see how things are going, fill it out again. It's not even that likely sometimes that you're going to get to that 3rd one, and if you do, we really encourage it. But what the data we're looking at is that first visit mainly to that 2nd visit. So it really shouldn't be that much of a problem. A lot of it's just a discussion, as well as it's really a brief form, so it really shouldn't be that much of a lift for families to do.
And in terms of getting the tool out, we haven't seen too much of an impact on the percent of time to give the tool to all of our child visits. We heard a lot of practices say, oh, this is a challenge, people pushing back, but it never just really reflected in like a huge dip, as you saw in that screening tool uptake that Dr. Goodman presented. So I don't think it's as impactful, even though there is a little pushback.
Well, we still probably will visits, they're seen 2 to 3 days after delivery, and then they're seen at 2 weeks, and then 1 month, 2, 4, 6 months.
We've done all those 3 at the start, or just like newborn visits.
Well, you also have to imagine, not every person, if you start this tomorrow, out of all the patients that come in that are 0 to 1, they're all not newborns, right? It might be a 4-month-old, it might be a 6-month-old. So let's say it's a 6-month-old, they're going to have 6 month, 9 month, 1 year. right? So of those that are newborn, they might get it some extra times, okay? And so then you just have to talk with the family, and the second time we'll encourage, the third time. If you don't do it the fourth time, I think you'll be okay. But the idea is that it's in your practice, you're trying to do it for everybody, you want to make sure there's consistency. So you just have to talk to the family and say, we really appreciate this helping us out.
Can I ask, what was allowed you to do like the first year versus like the first 6 months? And the only reason I'm asking that is at 9 months, you're going to be getting, at least in our practice, a TV screen plus a developmental screen. A year, you're going to get a LED, a developmental screen. So there's no way to get my family to do that. And it seems like we're really most interested in those first couple months when they come home, right? So.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that it's just those first couple months. I mean, so the mom is stressed, and now she's 3 months in, and she's like, I need a cigarette. So she starts smoking a little bit later on. So I think that it's important for the entire first year. Like the same as the Safe Sleep, we had the same question and problem, is that really it's under 6 months that you worry about with inappropriate sleep position and location. But the AAP's recommendation is up to 1 year of age. We went up to 1 year of age. So I think it's an important thing. I think that, when you actually go and put it into practice, you'll see the number that you're actually filling out, and the amount of time it takes is minimal. It really is. So I would say it's one of those things where you hear it, you feel this angst, and you're like, this is going to be hard. And then you do it, and you're like, this is really easy. So I'm just telling you, you've heard 2 practices, and I'm not trying to totally preach, but you've heard already 2 practices. It's really not that bad.
And they're doing it again.
Right, and they're doing it. They keep doing it. So.
Well, I'd like to say that sweet thing. That drove me crazy because, I got pushback. I think, you're not giving out, literature on people that are placing their babies to sleep incorrectly. I'm like, but those are the 9 and 12 month visits. And if I'm giving people a handout saying, no, you should not be placing your 1-year-old to sleep on their side, people are just not going to take it.
And we did address that. So if you look at question 8 now, it isn't as picky, against for lack of a better word. So we try to get some feedback and build that into this tool so it's not as a 9-month-old. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. Because I can just see, getting all the staff on the front to remember any of these out. I want to give them the black and white when they're supposed to do it. So, do you want us to screen with checks?
Any well child visits. Okay. Solely well child visits. Because if you have ill visits, and then it just adds to the complication. We're just looking, say, newborn, 2 month, 4 month, 6, just those.
All right. And then if they're late for a 1 year well check, say they're coming in at 13, 14 months, do you want us to screen them?
No.
No? Okay.
Once they're over 1 year of age, done.
All right.
But they are 1 year of age.
I mean, under 1 year of age. Once they...
Under 12 months.
Yes, under 12 months, thank you.
If they're coming in 12 months.
12 months and under, so under 13 months.
If they come for the 12-month visit, but they're over 12 months of age, then it's just, you're not concluded.
Okay.
Because most people don't come at 12 months, so we see them maybe a week over 12 months.
that's fine.
So they are in the, they're out, because July 22nd, and I see them on 27th.
Right, I mean, the bottom line is, again, how do you want to do it in your practice? We are looking at kids 1 year and under. So if you decided that, we're going to stop this year, or every 12-month visit, we're going to include it, that's up to you within your practice. I would say, go with however you feel you want to do it. We're going to be looking at all of the data the same. So it really is, what are you going to include as your denominator? That's all that matters. So if you want to look at it and say, we're looking at all 12-month visits, so they come in at 13 months, 14 months, but it's counted as our 12-month visit, and we're going to include that in our denominator, then I would use the tool. If you're not going to include it, you're only going to look at 1 year, then I wouldn't include it. So it's really up to you of what you want to do.
I will say from a data perspective, we did set our parameters so that if the 1 year visit happened a week after their first birthday, those are still included. So I think we extended out to 15 to 20 days past that 12-month visit to have it included into the data set. So just, if it's the day after, don't worry, you can still.
Right, so just be consistent in what you're including.
I would like to hear from a practice who did wave one about how cumbersome is the data entry. Because I did PNP, and I pay.
Nothing like.
So there is no data entry. To be honest with you, you fill out the form, and then that form is your data sheet. You fax it in. That's it. You're done.
So this is it.
I had this thing, it was like kind of downloaded in my documents on the computer I used, and I did mine every day. It was just easier, so at the end of the day I had a stack of these. I just opened this up, filled it out, printed it out, stuck them all together with a paper clip and dropped it on the office manager's desk. How she entered them, I don't know. She might have waited till the end of the week, but I just did it every day. It took a minute, and probably 40 seconds of that was getting it off the printer and paper clipping it on.
You know, it's nothing.
Nothing like that, yeah.
Do fax machines read two-sided documents?
Yes, you can fax in two-sided documents.
Correct.
Yes.
But they also scan it, didn't they?
So you just put it in and read both sides?
Yes, for a fax,
Yeah.
yes.
And we
You
actually
can select
provide,
I mean, I
duplex.
use it so little now.
You can select duplex
Never.
faxing and it will scan and fax both sides.
and if you don't have the machine in your office, we will get it for you.
Nice.
We will give, I think we gave it to a couple practices in week one, so that they were easy to get the machine and get it easy.
Yes, there is, it is like a portal, so you will scan it in the batch, and it will just run
We have fast dollars. My secretary go ahead, all the information.
Yes.
It fax, it scan, and then send us a bill.
Yes, correct. And so we have a variety. Some practices prefer the scanning and uploading, some prefer faxes. We'll work with you either way.
Questions are good. I'm going to keep going. So
And if you do take time, if you haven't already completed that pre-work survey, we'll get that information from you and be able to help circumvent any challenges or things that you kind of get ready to hit the ground running. I think you're good.
Yes, yeah.
Wait one
You can wait when you don't have to do that.
So provider section. So this is how you're going to get your credit for the measures that we're collecting. What we need to do to make sure, if you have multiple providers especially participating in your practice, that you cleanly, as best you can in your handwriting, provide the initials of the physician or nurse practitioner that is completing this form. So we can see how many forms come in, and we make sure that if you submit on a monthly basis to get your MSC4 credit or whatever QI credit you're seeking. Then this is where your office flow components and the different ways you're going to collaborate with your core quality improvement team are going to start coming together. So, having one thing about animation tonight. The nurse or MA review the first side of the screening tool to see what the responses were to our screening questions on safe sleep. If the caregiver that's presenting at the well-child visit is a smoker or another individual in the home screen positive for smoking. So using the prompts that are here in this column, denoting whether or not the provider that's going in needs to discuss safe sleep, if you need to discuss smoking or vaping with the caregiver that's there, if their level of readiness indicates that you should be referring them to the Ohio Fit line, and then if there's another individual within the home that smokes or vape, whether or not you need to provide handouts and material to them. Within your packets, this is where the materials and everything come together. And as Kristen mentioned, having those at the ready when you walk into the encounter room, so not having to go back and forth and get handouts, or you have a folder or a file dex or whatever you may use for other handouts, having that ready so you can fold the handouts that are noted here in this nurse MA to complete column, have ready for when you go into the counseling encounter and begin, and you can reference those handouts. So first section within your packet has the handout crosswalk and what each of these numbers here mean. So if an individual does screen positive as the caregiver who's at the well-child visit for smoking, you would pull out handouts 1 and 4. Handout 1 is really just for you as a provider to have some framed talking points to have with this individual. Handout 4 is some myths about smoking, what's true and what's not. And then looking to see if they should be referred to the quit line. You can look if they are ready by having an answer of 2 or above to question 10. You would pull out handouts 2, 6, and 7. So they are willing to quit, so you pull out handout 2. Handout 6 is the Ohio Quitline referral form, and 7 is the brochure that has some more information. So you'll have those, you can have them ready as a backup, so you don't even have to pull different pieces. How you do that is suited to your practice. So having those three for an individual that is ready to quit. So that would be in combination with, should you discuss, you have your talking points, you have your myths, and then you have these quit assistance resources. If they aren't ready to quit, then you also have a resource for that individual, which is handout 3, and that's specific to their not willing to quit, and having that to provide to them. And then the final one is if there are other individuals within the home that smoke, equipping the caregiver that's in the office at the time of you with some talking points, and then some resources that they can bring back to that other individual, so that they can have that discussion with the family member. So you're looking at the Ohio Quitline brochure, and then handout number 2, which is the willing to quit resource that you can provide to them. Any questions on that? Yes.
How many PDSA cycles are we going to do?
3.
All right. So the other ones I did, I'll discuss with the patients, and I'll give out handouts. And then I'm doing PDSA cycles, and one of them is to increase the amount of time I discuss with the patients. And I've already been discussing with them all along, and it's like 100% already. So I need to do a PDSA cycle that's from increasing the level of discussion to a particular level. So are we going to say that for the first one I'll just hand out and I wouldn't discuss, so I can get a PDA cycle that says I wasn't discussing and I'm not discussing? Sure. And another PDSA cycle because I'm giving out resources.
So the PDSA cycles are really just to show that you did the quality improvement, so you need to send us 3 PDSA cycles that you've done. In essence and in theory, every day is a PDSA cycle, right? I tried it yesterday and it only got to 1 person. I need to get it to more. So what should I do? Well, I'm going to talk to my office staff manager. Okay, I tried that. Nothing happened. So then I'm going to talk to the nurse. We're going to do this. So those are all PDSA cycles to get to where you want it. But what you're going to send in is, how did I get it used all the time? Well, I eventually just talked to the office manager and we went from here to here. Done. Okay, so what you're sending us is almost like a summary, but you're right. Every day is a PDSA cycle to get to where you want to be, because the bottom line is the end result of the quality improvement measures and what you want to get to. If that makes sense.
So some of the PDSA may be who is going to give out the screening tool and figuring out at what point within the registration process are you giving it out. How are we going to complete and fax in the referral form when I already have done all this other stuff in the well-child visit? Am I doing that? Am I going to pass it off to a nurse? Who's going to be responsible for batching and submitting data? So just those types of things to figure out what's going to be the best way to approach it to make things as efficient and streamlined as possible. The next part is the provider section. If you were on the pre-calls, I emphasize this, but I want to call it out again so that you get appropriate credit for the measures that we're looking at. The words here that are underlined are attempted. So people, even though they indicate that they're ready to quit or they are screening positive for smoking or you have other individuals in the home, having that conversation can still be a challenge at times. So if you are opening that conversation with that individual and trying, whether or not they are ready to fully have that conversation, that's up to them. We can't force it. We don't want to press the issue if you're getting those signs that they're not ready to do this. If you try to have that conversation, you can select yes. If you don't try at all, that's when you select no. And that's very similar, especially for those repeat visits. You could say, I've seen previous visit, we've looked at, and we've seen some changes here, or haven't. Would you like to talk about this anymore? If not, no, you can still select yes, or try to have a conversation at this repeat visit. So just kind of noting that here. Very similar for the resources, as Dr. Gittleman mentioned, offering resources was also a challenge in the last wave. So if you come in at the ready with your handouts 1 and 4, 1 of which is your talking points and 4 is the actual handout, you can say, I have this resource for you, would you like it? Whether or not they take it, totally up to the family member, but you've given them some information that they can use. If you offer it to them, that's when you can select yes. If you don't offer anything, that's when you select no. And when we get on action period calls, so we're not overwhelming you with information for those repeat visits, let's discuss strategies and how you can document the information for those repeat encounters. And then finally, for offering the referral, very similar. You offer it to them, you can complete the paperwork with them and submit it and select yes, or you offer it and they decline it. both the declining and them saying yes count toward doing that step within the 5 days.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if they come for the second visit and you offered them resources, and then they come back for the next visit and you don't give them the resources, they say, I got that last time, then resources were provided. Okay, so just keep that in mind, because you're going to give resources, that's the most important thing, and if they've already had it, you don't have to every time give them the resource, so you check yes, they've provided.
So prior to scoring the tool and going through making sure that it's fully completed so that it's read properly, having double checks in place so that you can get the appropriate, yes, they screen positive for smoking. If they didn't, making sure that you can complete the rest of the form so that we scan that appropriately when the GRC gets it. As the tool is scored, talking points are highlighted and you can indicate and pull those resources, whether it's individually or having a packet at the ready based on the different answers that we have on the provider portion of the tool. Always completing your provider initials. This is how you guys get your credit. We need to know that you're actually providing this tool and that you did this counseling. Making sure that you have someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be the nurse, could be MA, but making sure that what needs to be addressed is selected so you have those prompts to go forward. And then making sure you're getting credit where credit is due. So even though it is busy, that you are selecting, yes, I addressed safe sleep, or no, I didn't, so that we know how to score and give you proper feedback on the measures that we're working on throughout the collaborative. Because if you're doing it and you're just not selecting that bubble, it's like documenting things in your EMR. If you don't bubble it, it's like it didn't happen. So we want to make sure that you guys are getting credit for what you're doing. Okay, so getting the screening tool into office flow. Some of you were able to attend pre-work phone calls, so you heard a little bit about process mapping and office flow diagrams. Others are joining from the session today, and some of you have already participated in collaboratives, so you kind of have a gist of what our process mapping exercise looks like. What we want to do today is kind of how we started this conversation with what challenges you thought you guys were going to have. How are you going to use an electronic system to get families to complete it without what's already happening in your office flow, or how you're going to fit this into the course of the well-child visit and discuss everything. So I really want to continue that conversation and see what you guys are currently doing with screening tools, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and any other issue that you think you may have as you looked at your current process, so that we can help circumvent some of those, so we can trial it, see how it works, and have our technical assistants call and discuss and have some feedback on how everything went.
Sorry.
Yes. So we discussed the high level, very simplified process map, a little more detailed that denotes all the different steps within the process, who's accountable for what, and how we can accomplish that, and then a swim lane that takes that detailed map and pulls everyone out either into a row or a column, so you can really clearly see who's responsible for what and how they interact with different people within the process. Again, if you didn't attend the pre-work phone call, we did record one. Yes, we did record one, so that's there, and I'm happy to go through and have a pre-work call with you as well to get you up and running if this is something that you're not comfortable with or if you're not familiar. So, opening it up to you guys, discussing your steps as you looked at your screening tools that you currently have in place, how that looks for you when you typically give them out, how you handle discussions, how you handle resources, and you handle referrals. So you can start from the top of what currently works for you guys and getting screening tools out into place.
We already the freezer bag is already on there, so we don't have to rely on our MOA at the front to give them to each family, because they always forget it. They didn't get it, it's cute, and just didn't want to fill out. If we're waiting for 30, 45 minutes, they could have done this already, but so I mean, it would be awesome to use our electronic checking process, but the fact that we'll have to print it out and then still fill out the provider card and that might not be working.
I mean, every practice is going to be different, but then you're going to have to find what works best for you. But for example, let's say you have paper charts, right? So that the day before or that morning, you ask for this form to be in every form, in every chart of every child that's under a year of age. Or you could do it so that, if it's medically, you have a special check next to each of them and say, these are the ones I have to make sure that they have it. whatever your consistent pattern is, you just have to find what's going to work for your practice so that you know that everyone is going to get it. Then, where are they going to get it? So is everyone going to get it in the room, or is everyone going to get it in the waiting room? So that would be the next question of, how do I do this? Then, who fills out what section? That would be the next question. And then you want it to be for you as the provider. All you have to do is that last portion is, they tell me what I need to say, I discuss these things, and that's where you're going to spend all of your time. So all the other stuff should be done beforehand. And the more that you can figure out where those things are going to be done and who's going to do it early on, the easiest it's going to be for you.
I think that's the important part. So who is going to be a part of this process with each of your practices and your core quality teams, from the front desk to the nursing to the providers that are participating, figuring out where you're going to meet and huddle. Written huddles at the start of each day can be very helpful for identifying not only the individuals that are getting the screening tools, but how we're going to interact and play on feedback information to providers that are involved. Emphasizing again, this is all well child visits, and however you want to define that 12-month or 1-year-old well child check, and very other purpose of the screening tools we covered that prior.
Yes, the other practices use their staff to the pediatric school.
So one of the ways is the nursing staff is checking the responses. They've been pulling these handouts and then putting them on the clipboard, or a little spot next to the door. Someone has used Post-it notes and put those. I think it was Christ Hospital did something with Post-it notes to indicate where the dogs were going. But some of them have to our patients, so we're given. Any other things as you're thinking about where the tool is going out, who's involved in the process, and what currently works for you guys, or issues that you do face right now with screening tools outside of inundating?
The question is that if parent does agrees for a second or two, like that referral, and I see that they have to fill out their name, and mom's name, whatever, do I have to do that, or my head can do it?
So that's one of the things we'll be discussing on that referral form. Pre-populating some of the information, so when you go in there, all you have to do is patient specific, and then fax that in.
Right, but I can help with that, because the way I have done the prayer project is that I do. So my MAs just line up with people for me, and they are in the name for the jar, and when I go in, I'll front up the exam, and everything, I go over questions and everything, and I see, and my MAs come in to give a shot in the everything. So I can continue this flow, even the MA part which you have guys have put up there, I can do this, because I try, and that's I get more knowledge, even the family history passes to whatever, I take it from the family rather than my MA from them. Because if I'm not taking it, I'm not remembering it. I know that family much better than my MA will do, because I know what families are doing. So that's how I've done always. However, the MA part and everything, which is like fast for the flow, so I just want to make sure that part, because I'm not going to waste my time filling out. That takes my breath getting out.
We don't want you to do something the way we just described. We want you to take what currently works for you and just plug this in. So that's why one of our exercises was to look at what you currently do with screening tools and figure out what works best and just pop it in there. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to add any extra and just putting the screening tool in and giving the resource. So what works, keep it going. And then there are other challenges that come as you're doing this specifically. That's what we want to help you figure out. So just the talking points, and then distribution. Where you currently are doing your screening tools, where you think is the best place. We've seen it at registration desks, having them give it a bunch of paperwork, and then having the nurse or MA being able to have time to either do a grooming process or reading it and checking it, and then also figuring out as you're looking what you currently do and the resources that you have, where the resources will be kept. So you have all those ones that are in the packet, how you're going to have those in a pile, where they're going to be at the ready, if it's something that's going to move with you room to room, have a centralized location, figuring out where that's going to be in the context of this collaborative. And then as you had just mentioned, how you have those discussions. So when is the best time to discuss positive screening?
about many of these potential barriers and already begun kind of problem solving mentally what's going to work best in your clinic. Two sort of big comments though that I'll say is one, true, for this collaborative, this is the screening tool we're using because this allows us to capture the type of information that gets to prove to you that you're building that consistent process of screening into your practice as efficiently and as effectively as possible, getting you and your clinic into the habit of being able to know and offer resources, and luckily also be able to literally capture the data that shows behavior change over time. But after this collaborative, the process that it may end up looking like in your clinic on a, from that point on process may be as simple as one question. Do you smoke? Is there anyone smoking in the home or not? So this is temporary in the sense that don't always think that for the rest of your life you've just signed up to use this screening tool, because you haven't, and if you have, then you're kind of thinking of it the wrong way. That's true for any of the things that we do and incorporate into our clinic practice. We test things out, we try to get ourselves into a really consistent pattern of practice, and then we streamline what we figure out is like the most important tidbits that gets us to the ultimate goal that we're trying to as well. And all the little things we kind of figure out, those little tweaks that we do every day to figure out how to best do that, those are our PDSA. Those are our PDSA. So that's what you're like literally just putting on 3 pieces of paper, sending them into Kristen, because that's like the check mark we do to help you guys get the MOC4 credit. But the bigger picture is we're just trying to help you as effectively and consistently as possible get a process that makes a difference to your families incorporated into your practice. So, you, like I said, you've talked about some of the barriers already that you're anticipating. You may find that those barriers may be a whole lot smaller than you expect once you actually start implementing. But some possible solutions we're putting up here as well as we're thinking particularly about incorporating the screening tools that you have. The ones in green are actually information, that feedback we got back from Wave 1 participants in particular as they were themselves going through this process of how to get this screening tool implemented, some things that they found particularly helpful. Again, may or may not apply really well for your clinic, may be perfect for your clinic. It's all about learning from others, copying others, kind of using it as a jumping off point so you figure out what works best in your own clinic. It is really useful for you to think about, though, what are the forms that naturally are part of well visits at whatever particular month of age that we're talking about, so you can think, one, strategically about how to do this portion, but two, it may have been a long time since you kind of looked at that process, and there may be other things you could be streamlining as well about those, because we tend to just add and add and add and forget to detract and detract, or at least sort of cut down. So are there consolidation options available, particularly for those that have their forms already electronically? That's going to be the tweaking process that goes on. How do I implement this in an electronic system, since that's the system that I use, versus the processes that people who are using paper forms maybe look very different for those that clinics that are using those types of forms. It is really useful, and again, we've heard back from our Wave 1 practices to really have clearly designated roles. Who in your clinic is going to be handing in the screening forms? Who in the clinic is going to be picking them up from the patient afterwards, scoring them, all of those things, faxing them at the end. Those roles, and being clear about who are doing those roles and who's going to be your backup if that person is out for vacation for the next week or so, are really important. Sam already went through in depth what the screening tool looks like, and in particular I'm focusing on this MD portion because this is really the nuts and bolts of where our data is coming from. And we already mentioned that that first column is typically, for most clinics, done by the MA or the nurse that's checking in the patient, but maybe that's not the best process for your clinic. You figure out what works best for the way your clinic flow already goes, or the way ideally you want your clinic flow to go. But it's really that moment where the person, whoever's filling it out, is sort of capturing what information the family filled out and recognizing is, do we have a smoker in this home, and do we have safe sleep happening or not? That's what we're capturing with that information. And then everything else is the portion that is filled out by the physician or the nurse practitioner or the provider who's seeing them afterwards. And don't overthink it. If they're not having any smoking or safe sleep, you're hitting non-applicable for all of these and you're done. If you do have some sort of smoking going on, or needing a quit line referral or all those sorts of things, I know Sam did a great job of kind of showing you exactly, if they answered this, then you get to give them this handout, and they answer that, and you give them that handout. The bottom line is you have lots of handouts and resources that you can give your family. You're going to intuitively recognize this is a family that's not ready to quit. You're going to give them handouts about information about smoking. If you have a family that's getting close to being ready to quit, or in that sort of mode of readiness, then part of what you're going to be giving them, hopefully, is quit line information referral. So don't feel like it needs to be exactly this handout or that handout. It's resources. You're giving them resources. You're offering resources. That's the whole point. And that's kind of what this was saying too. But again, from feedback we've heard from our Wave 1 participants is, even who's giving those resources or handouts. For some people, it was the provider. When they were in the room, they had those resources already in their clinic exam room, and they were just grabbing the ones they felt most applicable and sent them on their way. Or for other clinics, it was the NA or the nurse after the provider finished up with the whole exam and the whole visit, said, oh, give them this, this, and this. Maybe these resources are built into your EMR. Many of us have the capability to have these incorporated into the electronic version so that when you print out your natural end of visit summary, if your clinic is already set up with that, you can also add, handout 1, 2, and 3 that I want printed out with that goes with the family. So every clinic may have very different solutions, but the point is thinking about your clinic process so you can figure out the little things that you can test out to know what's going to work best for you over time. And it will probably change as you figure out where all the hiccups naturally may be. Same with the referral line. So if you get to the point that you do have a family that is beyond that sort of pre-contemplation and at least beginning to think about the possibility of quitting smoking, that referral line resource in particular, hands down one of the most useful strategies that Wave 1 participants found is having some of the portions either at least highlighted, because that way it was kind of clear exactly what needed to be filled out, or even potentially pre-populated to some extent. So you had a bunch of them that were ready and all it needed was the patient's signature and then it could be faxed on off to quit line. Questions? Yeah.
This is probably a dumb question, but okay, so if they're non-smokers and they stop, but we're still going to fill out this last section here, right?
Mm-hmm. But you're lucky because now you're just doing not applicable, right? Your MA or your nurse, or perhaps you, depending who's doing column number 1, will say, no, we don't need to discuss things. Like, no, we don't need to discuss smoking. And then columns 3, 4, and 5, the ND portion, is all not applicable.
But see, I thought the same three. It says if yes, response to question 8. I always consider it needs. Yeah, so yes. Well, don't you always discuss that and then
So that, again, it's very similar to the smoking. If they say that they're putting them to sleep on their back and therefore it's not a safe sleep issue, then you get to say, no, I don't need to discuss any further. They're already doing safe sleep. And column number 2 is not applicable. I don't need to offer any additional resources. That doesn't take away from a really important conversation to be able to say, I'm so glad to hear that you're keeping your baby in a really safe sleep position. But
So comment and just clarify too, if they screen negative, they don't have anything to discuss, all you have to fill out in that first column is no discussion needed. So those final columns of advise, assist, and arrange do not need to be completed. The system kind of captures that.
so you don't even need to do the not applicable? Okay, even easier. Did everyone hear that? If the column number 1 is basically they're sleeping well in safe positions and no one is smoking in the home, so basically the whole screening tool is a negative, then you're done. You don't need to fill in any more of the columns, not even the not applicable portion.
But if you decide you still want to give resources, that's okay, right?
Yes, yeah, you can. I'm assuming when the form, so I would probably suggest you don't fill out the rest of the form and say you gave resources, because then the system may pick up saying, there's something a little awry here that I gave resources though it said no. But that, again, does not at any means mean that you can't give additional resources if you want.
I just want to say that the way we've been doing it, the doctor doesn't even see the form if the patient's not a smoker, because the MA will fill out that first column and put it away.
Perfect.
And so you're only being told if there's a problem to talk about.
So just one other example of what other Wave 1 participants have figured out. Can you make it your process even more streamlined? Did I see that?
Oh, I was just thinking of if these handouts can be used, because, we can select what kind of handouts we want to go on our after visit summary from a log. And I didn't know if these can be used freely. I don't know if the hospital would ever let us just put these in as options for us. But are we allowed to use these? Are they copyrighted if we can't do anything?
You're allowed to use.
It's part of the program.
Okay. But I don't know if Dayton Children's would even.
No one's going to sue for trademark.
I mean, you can put your logos on them.
Yeah.
So that's also applicable. And all of you guys, these are great questions, and you shouldn't have to worry about, I'm not sure what to do. Kristen is there all the time, and so you can just call and say, hey, look, we're having a problem with this. What do you do? We have these monthly action period calls. You can ask at that time too. So you're not on an island isolated when you leave here. There is someone all the time that can help you answer any question that you have.
So the PDSA times 3 happens before you start?
No, it's happening kind of throughout. Remember, I mean, the PDSAs, when we say that, those are just literally the little things, the little trials you're doing to figure out how to best incorporate the screening tool or how to best consistently get your resources in the hands of the patients, or how best you were able to kind of consistently get a process where you were scanning these and sending them off. So you're probably going to do a whole lot more than 3, not necessarily in any even necessarily really formal way, but just jot 3 of them down onto the PDSA, the blank PDSA form that Kristen will make sure that you're having. So we can capture all that brain work that you did and mark it off for us.
Anytime within 7 months, 3 PDSAs.
Does it have a deadline as to when it needs to, the PDSAs need to be turned in?
I think that we have,
We have a slide that denotes
it's on.
due dates, but if you want to do 3 at the start to figure out how to get the screening tool out, how to grade it, and how to get resources, and have it done in the first month and fine tune, that works as well. So the dates are kind of, have these to us by, but you can do them sooner, if that works for you guys.
And then, are you taking this over part?
So we can do this later, so we'll move on to our next steps.
So this is about how to get it into the data portal, which is going to be very simple for all of you. So really, next steps for all of you, just as I said, to get you guys moving and out of here on time, is think of what your first PDSA cycle is going to be. Most often it's going to be, how do I get to use the tool every time? How are we going to get it into our office flow? That's probably one of the first PDSA cycles, so that you get to be using it more than 90% of the time in your office. And as I showed you in our first wave, within the first month, everybody was able to do that pretty consistently. Start using the screening tools by this Monday, and we're going to move forward from that point on. And again, these are small steps, so you might say in the first couple of days, I only want to use it in 0 to 2 months and see what it's like on a small scale. You might say, I just want to go right in and have everyone use it. You might say, so however you want to do it, that's for you. We're hoping that within the first couple of weeks, though, you've got that tool into place somehow. Friday, September 28th, submit your first week of data to the portal. If you're having any problems, questions, please call. We can walk you through it, figure out. If you don't have the tool to be able to submit it, let us know, and we can get you a fax machine or a scanner, whatever you need. Tuesday, October 9th is we're going to have a technical assistance call, so that at that time we're going to discuss any of the data, any technical problems that you're having. So that's one time to call in. However, you can call any other time if you have technical problems along the way. And then we would like you to submit your process map by October 9th. And the process map is really just how you're doing this in your practice. And then what we're going to do is we will be able to use that to see how other practitioners are doing it. Do you want to send them an example of a process map, Sam, that we've gotten from another? So we'll send you all an example, so it makes it really easy for you. They're like a template. Do you have any questions as we move forward?
I have 2 questions. If we're going to try and round up some other providers to join, what's the latest they can join from our groups?
We really would like to get folks started by October.
Okay.
So, and same thing for those of you who haven't done pre-work calls and are just wanting to join today. We don't expect you to start using the tool on Monday. So we will, over the next couple of weeks, I'll work with you to get you up, get you ready. And so we want to get everybody started by October for sure.
And if we're doing wave 1, which has a different data point than
you keep doing wave 1 until we're done. And then you'll have your new sheets.
So remember, this is a team effort. Not only is the team within your practice, we are part of your team as well, and we really want you all to succeed. So we are here for you. There's going to be some monthly expectations. You have to submit your data. If you want to submit it weekly, submit it weekly. If you prefer to hold on to them and submit it monthly, whatever works best for you. Our GRC team is really unbelievable being able to collect all that data and be able to analyze it on a monthly basis. These action period calls, I know they're hard. It's hard to get to another meeting. It's only 1 hour a month. We are only asking you participate in at least 3/4 of them. They're really helpful. Not only do we have an educational topic for 15 minutes, but also learning from other practices of what they've done is really helpful to bring back to your own practice.
And it only has to be one member of your team. It doesn't have to be everybody. It doesn't have to be you every time.
Right,
So
your MA could be on. And then we're going to review monthly data and participate in coaching when it's necessary. Mark your calendars. As I said, the technical assistance call and our first action period call is October 30th. PDSA cycles, these are the dates. I believe
you'll get all this information.
You'll get this information, so don't feel stressed about it right now. You'll get all of this along the way. All right. That is all we have. I know we went through a lot right now. I know that you're going to have more questions. I will also say that one of the things is start, trial, then ask questions, because you're going to have a lot of questions in. You're going to go, that was silly. It was really simple and obvious. So sometimes you just have to kind of trial a little bit. You know the ideas. Get this into practice. Fill these out. And if you have problems along the way, then please feel free to ask.
But the materials in order to start using the tools.
Correct.
We will take care of that. So if you are interested in joining the program and you have not done a pre-work call for wave 1, wave 2, because you would know that, you would have done the call already, see me, I'm gonna get your information, I'll follow up with you.
Are we mailing tools? How do they?
We will be mailing everything, yes.
Your phone numbers and this.
I'm sorry?
Reach out to you.
Yes, I'll give you that.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you had a good meeting, and we're excited to work with you on this project.